Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a book that is, honestly, just a devastatingly beautiful modern classic. We're looking at Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles. Now, it actually took Miller 10 whole years to write this masterpiece, and you know what? It totally paid off. It went on to win the prestigious Orange Prize for Fiction, and it's easy to see why. By blending this incredibly deep classical scholarship with just breathtaking emotional resonance, she literally breathes fresh, lyrical life right into a 3,000-year-old myth.
So, let's kick things off by looking at how Miller basically flips the script on the ancient hypermasculine myth of Homer's Iliad. Homer famously starts with, "Sing, goddess, of the terrible rage of Achilles." Right away you get it. It's a massive, sprawling epic all about war, pride, and frankly, a lot of anger. But Miller, she shifts the lens completely. Her version is this quiet, intimate subversion told entirely from the perspective of Patroclus, who historically was just a minor background character. By focusing on his profound, deeply personal connection to the great hero, she makes this huge ancient mythology feel incredibly relatable and accessible to us today.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at epic reimagined, then boyhood, exile, and love. After that, we'll cover the pull of prophecy, redefining heroism at Troy, followed by the cost of glory, and finally, a legacy beyond legends.
Section 1, An Epic Reimagined. We'll be looking at how Madeline Miller reclaims a queer love story that has been marginalized by centuries of historical straightwashing.
This really gets to the heart of the novel's core shift. If you think about traditional mythology, it paints Achilles as this ultimate Greek golden boy, right? He's the invincible warrior whose defining traits are basically toxic pride and blinding rage. But Miller's Achilles is so much more deeply humanized. Yes, he's still a deadly demigod, absolutely, but at his core, he's a devoted lover. His ultimate actions are entirely driven by his bond with Patroclus. Miller is actually pushing back hard against modern media that tries to erase this romance. You might remember the 2004 movie Troy trying to claim they were just cousins? Yeah, no. Miller restores the intense, romantic mentorship that was actually present in ancient texts, like Plato's Symposium.
Moving right along to Section 2, Boyhood, Exile, and Love. Let's trace exactly how an exiled prince and a demigod forged such an unbreakable bond. So our narrator, Patroclus, starts out as this awkward, frankly disappointing mortal son who accidentally ends up killing a noble boy. Because of this, he gets exiled to the kingdom of Phthia, and well, that's where he meets Achilles. Now, Achilles' mother is Thetis, a terrifying sea goddess who absolutely despises Patroclus. She sees him as this totally unworthy mortal. But despite her fierce opposition, Achilles claims Patroclus as his companion anyway. Eventually, the two of them leave to spend these incredibly idyllic years training under the wise centaur Chiron, way up on Mount Pelion. Up there, far away from all the crushing pressures of royal life, their friendship just naturally blossoms into this deep, soulful romance.
Now, what I find super interesting here is how Miller uses these recurring touchstones to physically ground their romance. You see, as Miller was trying to find Patroclus' voice, she realized it wasn't really this booming, epic voice. It was actually a lyric one, entirely focused on beauty. Take the lyre, for instance. It represents the home they built together and Achilles' surprising sweetness. Then you have the figs, which symbolize their youthful love and discovery. And finally, the armor. Instead of giving us page after page describing cold weapons of war, the simple act of Achilles and Patroclus dressing each other in their armor becomes this incredibly intimate motif. It's beautiful, but it also heavily foreshadows their tragic fate.
But those golden days abruptly end in Section 3, the pull of prophecy. Word arrives that Helen of Sparta has been kidnapped. So, the gods have officially declared that Troy simply cannot fall without Achilles. But as we all know, prophecy in Greek myth is always a double-edged sword. Achilles is suddenly forced to make an impossible choice. Does he live a quiet, completely obscure life, or does he chase eternal fame, which, by the way, absolutely guarantees an early death? It's a devastating internal conflict that ends up shaping the rest of their lives. I mean, think about it. Does he stay behind to live a long, happy, peaceful life with Patroclus, or does he fulfill his destiny to become the greatest warrior in human history?
Thetis is, understandably, desperate to save her son from this lethal prophecy. She actually tries to hide Achilles on the island of Skyros, even going as far as disguising him as a woman. But they're eventually discovered by the incredibly cunning King Odysseus. Now, here's the catch. Patroclus is bound by a blood oath he took as a boy to defend Helen's marriage, so he is literally obligated to go to Troy. And Achilles? Well, there's no way he's letting Patroclus go alone. So, seduced by the tantalizing promise of glory and a fierce desire to protect his love, Achilles follows him right into the impending doom of war.
That brings us to Section 4,
redefining heroism at Troy. Let's take a look at how the narrative shifts as we meet legendary figures through the deeply humanizing lens of Patroclus.
So here we are in the Greek camp meeting the key players. First up, we've got the immensely prideful and arrogant King Agamemnon, who is just constantly clashing with Achilles. Then there's Hector, the noble Trojan prince. Now Achilles actually flat out refuses to fight Hector, basically just to delay his own prophesied death. We've also got the ever-pragmatic Odysseus, and then crucially, we meet Briseis. She's a Trojan War prize who Patroclus bravely saves from Agamemnon's abuse. Achilles steps in and claims her as his own prize, but solely to protect her for Patroclus. Because of this, she and Patroclus end up forging this incredibly deep, almost sibling-like bond. This is where Miller radically redefines heroism. It's no longer just about shedding blood on a battlefield. Instead, it's about vulnerability, compassion, and the quiet, everyday bravery of meaningful human connection. You know, ancient myths are always celebrating the invincible warrior, but Patroclus, he doesn't care at all about immortal fame. His heroism really shines through in how he heals the wounded and protects the innocent, just like he did with Briseis. It's such a powerful statement, honestly. It reminds us that true bravery often lies not in how many men you can strike down, but in how deeply and fiercely you can love.
Which brings us right to Section 5, the cost of glory. Tensions are about to seriously escalate when Agamemnon fatally insults Achilles' pride.
So picture this. Agamemnon demands Briseis back. And obviously, this is a massive, very public blow to Achilles' honor. In retaliation, Achilles just stubbornly refuses to fight. He literally sits by while the Greeks are being slaughtered. It perfectly mirrors the ancient allegory of Meleager, a beloved king whose toxic pride ultimately destroyed his own legacy. Just as Meleager refused to protect his people until it was way too late, Achilles becomes so utterly obsessed with his own honor that it completely blinds him to the immense, horrific suffering happening literally just outside his tent.
Let's just pause here for a second and ask ourselves, what actually happens when toxic pride completely overtakes a hero? And more importantly, what will Patroclus ultimately sacrifice to save the innocent people he cares about? Because as the Trojans start breaching the Greek camps, Patroclus reaches his breaking point. He simply cannot stand by and watch his friends die.
In a desperate, completely selfless bid to save the Greeks, Patroclus takes to the battlefield wearing Achilles' armor. His plan is just to pretend to be Achilles to scare the Trojans away. But fate is incredibly cruel, and Patroclus is tragically struck down and killed by Hector. This event unleashes a grief in Achilles that is just gut-wrenching. As he realizes he has to somehow control the crushing feelings in his chest and go hunt down Hector, the man who destroyed the one he loved the most, Achilles faces a truly agonizing truth. The fame he was so desperate for, it ended up costing him his very soul. At this point, he isn't fighting for glory anymore. He's just a hollow shell, fighting purely for revenge.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, a legacy beyond legends. Here we witness the tragic aftermath of the war and the quiet persistence of a truly soul-binding bond.
Achilles does exact his brutal revenge on Hector, notoriously dragging his body behind his chariot. But shortly after that, Achilles himself falls in battle, fatally shot in the heel. Per his final request, his ashes are mixed together with Patroclus's, joining the two of them physically forever. But then, Achilles' utterly cruel son, Pyrrhus, flat out refuses to put Patroclus's name on their shared tomb. He arrogantly claims that a mere companion doesn't deserve to be memorialized next to a true hero. And because of this petty cruelty, Patroclus' spirit is left trapped in a cold, dark tomb, completely unable to pass on into the underworld. But here is the most beautiful twist. It is actually Thetis. Yes, the hostile goddess mother who hated Patroclus for his entire life, who finally recognizes the true depth of their bond. She is so moved by Patroclus' gentle memories of her son that she etches his name onto the tomb herself, finally releasing his spirit. It's breathtaking. The story doesn't end with the bloody ruin of Troy. Instead, it ends with a lasting question for all of us to ponder. Does love and compassion ultimately outlive even the greatest of legends? As those two shadows finally reunite in the dark, we are left with this powerful reminder. True immortality isn't found on a battlefield. It's found in the hearts of those we fiercely love.